Greetings fellow viewers and gratitude for sparing of your time for this video. Before I begin, I wish to apologize in advance for how long it took me to get this video out, along with any details I may get wrong, as it has been a while since I've last read A Song of Ice and Fire and seen Game of Thrones in its entirety. Last time I did an overview of the wasted potential for Game of Thrones, but avoided going into the characters and events due to the vast amount of spoilers for both the books and the TV series. Not to mention the length and time it would take to do each character and event in a single video. The next series of wasted potential character videos relating to Game of Thrones will go specifically into the characters themselves, the differences between the show and the source material, and at what point the show went wrong. For a time, I will first be covering the members of House Stark. The reason is mainly because if you were to ask me which house I am a fan of, it has to be House Stark, as the stories of the Stark family was what actually drew me into the show. That and direwolves are cool looking creatures we didn't get enough of in the show. With that being said, for this video, the character whose wasted potential I will be focusing on is the young wolf, Robb Stark, son of Eddard Stark and the King of the North and the Trident. Like many of the younger characters in the show, they aged up Robb partially due to the violent and sexual content Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire is known for. The problem this presents is how the aged up characters are still treated as children or referred to as such. I do understand why the aging up was done, but this detail, minor as it seemed, is something the showrunners had seriously overlooked. Robb's story in Season 1 is largely the same as it is in the first book, A Game of Thrones. However, one of the biggest differences is how he carries himself. In the show, he behaves as a mature young adult due to the aging up of his character, as well as Richard Madden's portrayal of him. His book counterpart, however, tends to come across as more hot-headed due to still being a teenager and has to be rebuked at times by his mother. As to Robb's story, in the books we only see Robb from certain characters' point of view, mainly from the eyes of his mother, Catelyn, his half-brother, Jon, and his younger brother, Bran. We also learn bits of info about him through other various characters. The show, however, gives him more prominence and even a few scenes exclusively for the show to better expand on his character. When Robb is first introduced in the show, he is seen alongside his half-brother, Jon, as they watch Bran practice his archery. When their father receives word of a captured deserter from the Night's Watch, Robb accompanies his father alongside his brothers and their entourage in order to pass judgment on the deserter. The following scene with the direwolf pups is largely the same as it is in the first book, with the little changes worth noting. During King Robert's visit to Winterfell, there's a brief show exclusive scene between Robb, Jon and Theon having a brief conversation that shows the viewers the camaraderie between them. Now in the first book, A Game of Thrones, during the King's visit, there's animosity that develops between Robb and Joffrey Baratheon during a sparring session. This is cut entirely from the show due in part to the character's age. His farewell to Jon is close to the first book with some minor differences. Another notable difference in another scene is the manner of his response when he learns that his mother suspects the Lannisters' involvement in the crippling of his younger brother. His book counterpart brandishes his sword in a display of bravado, whereas his show counterpart also displays anger, but is far more tempered about it. In the source material, Ned once told Robb to get to know the men who would follow him into battle one day, and vice versa. It's a shame this was never added in the show, as well as a scene between Ned and Robb. His scene in the Winterfell Hall with Tyrion and Bran is lifted from the first book, with few omissions worth noting. There's a follow-up scene from this in the first book where Robb and the others are dining with Yoren in the Night's Watch, where he gets news of what became of Uncle Benjen. This is followed up with a conversation between Robb and Bran. These two scenes never made it into the show. During their ride, as Bran is testing his ability to ride his horse, Robb informs him of what happened in King's Landing, of Jory's death and their father's injury. In the show, this is discussed between Robb and Theon, as Theon is urging Robb to call the banners. A follow-up to this has Robb fighting some stray wildlings that attempts to take his younger brother hostage. His book counterpart has him on horseback and two direwolves, one of them being his own, fighting alongside him. His show counterpart's fight scene is watered down severely, and this is in part due to a dreaded thing called budget constraints. Honestly, it can't be helped as these things do happen. Something worth noting here is in the first book, some of the guards were accompanying them as it was a hunt and they were sidetracked, which resulted in Rob and the wolves fighting alone. Rob chastises Theon for shooting the wildling holding his brother hostage, but the first book elaborates on this better as to why he understandably did so. If the arrow had not been a kill shot, the wildling would have slit Bran's throat in the panic. Another show exclusive scene to my knowledge has Rob and Theon going through a royal letter informing them of Eddard Stark's imprisonment. Same letter also wants Rob to ride for King's Landing to swear fealty to Joffrey. Instead, Rob instructs Maester Luwin to send ravens to all their vassals in order to muster his army so they can attempt to rescue his father and sisters. I've heard a rumor that there was supposed to be a brief sequence with all the northern houses receiving the call to arms, but because of budget reasons and that they didn't have the actors for characters like Roose Bolton yet, this was cut entirely. The dinner sequence with High Lords like Grey Jon Umber and his final conversation with Bran are lifted directly from the first book. Of course, there are some details omitted here and there, mainly the parts where each of the main Northern Lords test him in their own way, as well as Rob confessing to Bran that Grey Jon Umber actually scared him. The last part made sense due to him still being a teenager. Rob is soon reunited with his mother as they have a private moment. Now the bit where Catelyn tells him that the letter was the Queen's words written by Sansa was rather redundant as we just had a similar scene with Maester Luwin. But the follow-up conversation I found excellent as Rob is given a clear picture from his mother over what's at stake and what kind of man Tywin Lannister is. In the first book, Catelyn tests him to see if he's ready by asking him what his plan was. He could not afford to look indecisive in front of the likes of Lords Karstark and Bolton given their reputation. I wish the show did this as well, but due to Rob's aging up, it was most likely that he was supposed to be more learned and confident as opposed to his book counterpart. In order to cross the Twins, Rob's mother has to negotiate with Walder Frey to open his gate so that the Northern Army can pass through. The price for House Frey's alliance to Rob involves marriage to one of his daughters, amongst other terms. Rob begrudgingly accepts, whereas his book counterpart was more solemn about it. Either way, speed and time was essential in order for him to rescue both his father and sisters in time. In the show, during a war meeting, Rob spares a captured spy and sends him back to Tywin Lannister, much to the objection of his council and even his mother. A protest is quick to silence. His plan was to give the spy false information to take back to Tywin, then have 2,000 men distract the Lord of Casterly Rock while his main army take Jaime by surprise and free Riverrun from the Lannister siege in the process. The first book is somewhat different as it goes into more detail regarding the twofold battle. Roose Bolton and some 5,000 men were to distract Tywin's army while the main northern army took on an unaware Jaime. Due to budget constraints, the battle at the Whispering Woods itself was cut from the show. The books do give some detail of what happened through Catelyn's point of view and even Jaime's in the third book. In both the books and the show, a captured Jaime goads Rob into a single combat, but Rob does not fall for the bait. He then addresses his men, reminding them of the lives lost in this war and that it's only begun. As for his Lord Father, it was already too late. When word of Ned's death found its way to the northern host, the grieving scene is played out in two different ways. Catelyn finds a grieving Rob hacking his sword at a tree before going to comfort him. His book counterpart has Catelyn finding Rob and his most trusted men praying solemnly before a weirwood tree in honor of Eddard Stark. Rob's King in the North scene is pretty much the same in both the books and the show. One notable omission from the first book is the length of them debating the next move prior. A trivia also worth noting is that in the first book it was Lord Karstark who said Glover's line about keeping their red castle and their iron chair. Another omission I must mention is the forging and presence of his crown and his title as King of the Trident as well, due to his strong Tully heritage. Due to these omissions, I always thought the wolf pelt cloak he wears serves as his crown of sorts in order to distinguish the North apart from other kingdoms.